Hey everybody, Ronan here. So it might be a little bit risky to talk about risk without any script, but here we go. Everything's got risk involved, and every good business and every good leader knows this. But when you start talking about risk to the average person, their eyes glaze over. They get a bit bored. They think it's a bore to people within the company quite often. So what's it all about? Why am I talking about risk? Well, everything has risk in it, right? No matter what you do, there's risk involved. And sometimes when people are too risk averse, they let dreams slip by. They don't understand fully the concept of risk and how to actually mitigate it. And so I know the insurance industry is not people's favorite industry, but we can all learn a lot from it in terms of how they deal with risk. So in insurance, there's no such thing as a bad risk. Okay, I'm going to say it again because it's actually true. There's no such thing as a bad risk in insurance. There's only a bad price. So if there's $100 million building and it's like this, even worse than the Leaning Tower of Pisa, excuse me. If the owner of that building wants to insure it, thinking, oh, it could fall over tomorrow, well, an insurer will look at it and say, okay, it's $100 million. The risk here to us is $100 million. And so they'll say, yeah, sure, we'll give you a premium, and you have to pay us $100 million or maybe $90 million to insure the building. So insurers won't say, oh, that's too risky for me, I can't do that. Yeah, some will, but you will find an insurer somewhere who won't. And those insurers usually have very good actuaries. They have very good ways of calculating what the risk actually is, and they'll price it accordingly. And in insurance, you also have reinsurers. So they insure the insurance companies in the event that the insurance companies aren't able to meet their obligations. So I'm not going to rattle on about insurance here, but I want to actually bring it into regular business and leadership that we all understand. And it's around complacency. So if risk is out of view for most people, and it's not regarded as being the sexy topic of business, then owners, especially creative owners and creative leaders, can sometimes become complacent without knowing it. Not arrogant, but just complacent. A good example was probably the mortgage industry a couple of decades ago, where in some countries interest rates were, I think they were double figures actually in some countries, and defaults were low, so interest rates were high. Lending criteria were quite stringent, so it was hard to get a loan, and defaults were low. So the risk parameters were being managed quite well. But then it's like, the victim of your success, or the strength becomes the weakness. And so the reason the housing problem happened was because it had been so strong, not because it had been weak. So because it was strong, and strong for fairly strong for a reasonable period of time, lenders start to think, okay, well, we can relax our lending criteria a little bit. There hasn't been major defaults for years. And so they relaxed the interest rates, they relaxed the criteria for loans. In the extreme in the US, there were no documentation loans, things like that. So because things were so strong and so low in risk, things became actually very risky. So people took more risk, but they didn't calculate it properly because they didn't adjust their calculations for the new criteria that they were loaning against. And so a bust happened. So this is kind of boring for a lot of people, but actually it's essential in business. So if you can think about it in business and leadership, in the sense that there's no risk that's too risky. First of all, if you really want to do something, if you really want to do it, then there is no risk that's not worth taking. if you actually measure it correctly and mitigate it correctly. So that just means looking at the downside. So you look at the downside and you protect the downside. And if you protect the downside correctly, then you'll be okay. Just as I'm talking, Richard Branson came to mind. If I get this right, when he set up Virgin Atlantic, he went up against British Airways. And of course, British Airways was it was a strong airline at the time, globally. And he was going to fly between Britain and the US. And so he protected his downside by, I think it was Boeing. He went to Boeing and said, we'll lease these planes from you, but I want to guarantee that if it doesn't work out, you will take them back, or you'll buy them back, and we will have no debt on the planes if it doesn't work out for a certain period of time. And so that was him. That's how he mitigated his risk. And so off he went. He was okay, and it worked out. So here's the thing, here's the psychological impact of risk. When you know that your downside is protected, you're psychologically in a better place. You're psychologically more likely to, launch yourself all into something. And the truth is, for something to really work, your energy needs to be all in. Now some people might think, oh, that means I should quit my job tomorrow and start a business the next day. No, it's not. I mean, plenty of people will tell you to do that on the internet, but it's probably a risky strategy, to be honest. A better question would be, how can I quit my job and set up a business? For example, if that's the context for somebody watching. And then you'll get ideas as to how it can be done. For a leader, it might be, how can we go into a new market? And what are the risks and how do we protect the risks? Because if you know the risks are protected, you're okay. If you do a tandem skydive and you're strapped to somebody, you probably feel a bit safer than if you did it by yourself the first time. So mitigating risk is actually the most important, well, I keep saying the most important thing, maybe it is. Probably having a great vision and knowing your purpose are the single most important things, but then mitigating risk on the way to making that happen is critical. And unfortunately, that's where most people give up. They give up because they haven't been able to mitigate the risk, or in their mind they think, oh, it's too risky, or I don't know how. They do the how and they do everything around the how and all the worry about the risk too early, and so it pollutes the vision, it pollutes the purpose. Whereas if you have a vision and you have a purpose, or you have an inkling somewhere inside you, that you want to do something, that you have to do it, it's a calling, it's like, I just got to do this at some time in my life. Instead of walking away because it's too risky, maybe the purpose for having the vision and the reason for having the purpose is so that you learn to overcome that maybe extreme aversion to risk. So, like I said, with the insurers, the best ones, they say, I'm paraphrasing, there's no such thing as bad risk. There's only a bad price. Okay? So think about that and how you can apply it. To your business, to your next venture, to your leadership, to your biggest dream in life. If you're not doing it because you think it's too risky, okay, if that's the reason, if you're not doing it because you think it's too risky, maybe that's not a great reason, assuming you really want it. I'm not saying, oh yeah, let's try, jump off a 100-meter bridge for fun. I'm not talking about that kind of stupid stuff. I'm talking about something you really want to do, if you're a business owner or a leader, or aspiring to be one of those things. So that's it. So it's all about complacency. So the arch enemy of business owners and of leaders is complacency. There are others, okay, but an arch enemy of it is complacency, because when people get complacent, a rot sets in, and then things do become risky because they've forgotten about how they did mitigate risk once upon a time. They've forgotten about the downside. They've gotten complacent, where when they set the thing up initially, they understood the full picture. They understood if we do this, then there's a chance this might happen, and we don't want that to happen. Or if we do that, there's a chance this might happen. And they had it all mitigated. So that's essential. So if you're feeling a lot of risk about something right now, then I think the thing to do is just mitigate it. Like if you're really wanting to do something, and you're wanting to do it for the right reasons, meaning the right reasons for you, not for what somebody else thinks or what I think. If you're wanting to do something and you're wanting to do it for the right reasons according to you, and you're not stepping up or leveling up, or you're not making a move because you think it's too risky, then maybe just even play with it. Just experiment and ask, how can I mitigate this risk? What is the downside? As I'm talking, I feel like I should have stopped this a minute or two ago, but actually lots of things are coming to me. So one of the things that I've done that worked well for me, and I've done it with clients, is you do a best case, worst case, and most likely case scenario. So if you're going to do something, usually when there's worry or fear, people automatically go into a worst case scenario kind of feeling, especially if it's something that's going to test them, okay? And the only things really worth doing, in my view, are the ones that really test us. So if you're going to do something, what's the best thing what's the, I'll start with the worst thing. What's the worst thing that can happen? And write it down. Just what is the actual worst thing that can happen if you do what you're thinking about? If you leave your job and set up this company, what's the worst thing that can happen? If you take your business in another direction, what's the worst thing that can happen? If you try and get a job on a board, or if you try and go for a senior executive role, what's the worst thing that can happen? Sometimes people discover it's an ego thing. I'll be laughed at, or I'll be vilified. What will whoever think of me? All that kind of thing. So if it is that, just write it down. If that's the worst thing, write it down. And then write down what's the best thing that can happen. Okay, so you've got the worst thing here. Okay, let's say the worst is, I'm trying to see, am I still in the picture? The worst thing is here, and let's say the best thing is here. So then write down what's the best thing that can happen if I take this path. Okay, and just write it down. And then ask yourself, what's the most likely thing that's going to happen if you take the path that you're going to take? And in my experience, the most likely, if it's something that you really want to do, and for the right reason according to you, then the most likely thing that's going to happen is usually closer to the best outcome rather than closer to the worst outcome. The problem is people just don't write this stuff down. They don't think it through. So that's kind of like a kind of smuggling a little bit of risk thinking, risk mitigation thinking into your processes. And from there, that bit is just to get you moving. Okay, that doesn't mitigate all the risk. It just gets people to realize, hey, this isn't as bad as I thought. And so when most people dwell on the worst thing. Okay, if they're not used to business, or they're not used to being in a senior leadership role, if it's a new world for them, they tend to dwell closer to the worst case scenario. And all it is just because they haven't done the journey. They're scared. But if you do it on paper, worst case, best case, and then what's the most likely case? The most likely case will usually be up. It's usually about 75% of the way up. If worst is 0 and best is 100, it's usually about 75%. Sometimes even 95% up there. So if you get to there. If you find that you're getting to there, then at that point you go, okay, well, if this is the most likely thing, how can I mitigate the downside? So, take a lesson from the insurance companies. Actually, I'm thinking about Warren Buffett now, and, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but he makes his money from writing insurance policies. That's where he gets all the money to invest, most of it. He did other things in his early days, but that's actually how he made his major money, is writing insurance premiums and reinsuring other insurance companies. Why? Because he has some of the best actuaries in the world working for him. So think about insurance companies, think about Richard Branson, when he launched Virgin Atlantic, he mitigated his worst case scenario was that he would blow up, go bankrupt, and be sued by all the banks. So he just made a deal with Boeing that they would buy all these planes back. And what is it for you? Okay, so I do it in my business. I do it with my clients, and I recommend that you do it too. So it's also part of what we're going to be doing in the brand new course starting on Friday. So today is Tuesday, so we're starting Friday in a couple of days' time. A big part of the early modules in this is going to be identifying your risk and mitigating it so that you can really focus. And the mitigation of the risk is what's going to determine the plan. And also it's what's going to determine your unique channel to get there. It'll be a channel unique to you that nobody else will have, because your vision is unique to you, your risk will be unique to you, and then your channel to get there will be unique to you, which is why people often go down the wrong path when they compare themselves to other people, because it's all unique. So I'll be facilitating the whole thing, 4 months plus another year of membership for free thrown in. And go to www.callronan.com and you can book in time to chat with me. There's no charge for it. There may or may not be slots left when you go there, I don't know, because it's direct into my diary. So if there are no slots, you can always email me or send a message on Facebook if you're watching this on Facebook. And yeah, I look forward to helping you out. And either way though, I hope this video helped, and I hope you're okay with risk and you know what to do. And remember, avoid complacency, flip it. What's the opposite of complacency? Flip it. Maybe it's enthusiasm or energy. Okay, so if you're feeling complacent on something, that's a flag. That is a major, major, major red flag. So if you're feeling it, just flip it. And how do you get yourself enthusiastic again? But that's for another day. Hope that helped, and until next time, all the best.